My name is Logan, and if I ever had any illusions about where I stood in my family, they shattered the day I found out about the will. And no, it wasn't some heartfelt family discussion or a moment of transparency. I stumbled upon it by sheer, dumb luck. It happened a few months ago at my parents' house, the same house I had been helping them keep for the past 5 years. Mortgage payments, grocery runs, fixing things whenever they needed repairs, you name it. I did it. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Chase, contributed absolutely nothing. And I mean nothing. No job, no responsibilities, just an expert at coasting through life, while my parents enabled him every step of the way. That day, my dad asked me to scan some documents for him, legal and financial papers that he and Mom couldn't be bothered to handle themselves. I didn't think much of it until I spotted a folder labeled estate plan and last will and testament buried in the stack. I'm not usually the type to snoop, but considering how much I had sacrificed for them, I figured it wasn't unreasonable to take a look. After all, I'd been their financial crutch for years. It was only fair to know what the future held, and that's when my stomach dropped. Everything was going to Chase. The house, the savings, the assets. My name wasn't even mentioned outside of a generic line about how they loved both of their sons equally. Yeah, equally. That's why their golden boy got everything, while the one who actually made sure they never went without was left with nothing. I felt like a complete idiot. Here I was, sacrificing my time, money, and energy, believing that deep down, my parents appreciated me. But no, they were planning a future where I didn't exist, except as the fool who kept the lights on while Chase sat back and reaped the benefits. It wasn't just that Chase was lazy. He was entitled. He had never once helped them, never contributed a single dime, yet somehow he convinced them. He was the one who deserved it all. Maybe because he was the youngest. Maybe because they had always babied him. Maybe because he knew exactly how to manipulate them. Whatever the reason, they had made their choice. I sat there staring at the document, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and betrayal. How long had they planned this? Had they always seen me as nothing more than a walking ATM? Had they ever actually valued what I did for them? I had no idea how long I was frozen there before my dad walked into the room. "Logan, what's taking so long?" he asked casually, completely oblivious to the fact that my world had just tilted off its axis. I didn't bother hiding the will. I held it up and locked eyes with him. "So, this is how it is?" My voice was low, dangerous. "Everything goes to Chase, after everything I've done for you?" For a second, I saw the brief flicker of guilt on his face. Then he sighed like I was some spoiled child throwing a tantrum. "Logan, it's not what you think." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, really? Because it looks pretty damn clear to me. I've been the one paying your mortgage, fixing your house, making sure you never had to stress about bills while Chase does nothing. And yet, you still decided he's the only one who matters." Dad shifted uncomfortably, but instead of an explanation, all he muttered was, "It's complicated." That was it. That was all he had to say. No apology, no justification. Just a weak excuse and an expectant look, as if he thought I would just nod and move on. I should have walked out right then, but I needed to hear it from both of them. "Mom!" I called, my voice sharp. She walked in a moment later, her face falling when she saw what I was holding. Guilt. Good. At least she had the decency to look ashamed. But then she opened her mouth, and any illusion of remorse vanished. "Logan, sweetheart," she said, softly, as if her tone would somehow make it better. "You don't need the inheritance. You have a good job. You're independent. Chase, he struggles. We just want to make sure he's taken care of." Something inside me snapped. They weren't oblivious. They knew exactly what they were doing. And in their minds, it was justified. They had spent years enabling Chase's laziness, and now they were rewarding it while tossing me aside like I was nothing. I took a slow, deep breath, clenched my jaw, and set the will down on the table. "Got it," I said, my voice eerily calm, glad to know where we stand. Then I turned and walked out of the house, ignoring their protests as I slammed the door behind me. They had made their decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't go back. I didn't call. I didn't check in. For the first time in years, I let them handle their own problems. If something broke in the house, they could fix it. If they needed groceries, they could figure it out. And most importantly, when the mortgage bill came due, that was on them now. The silence lasted about 2 weeks. At first, I think they assumed I was just sulking, and that I'd come crawling back, like always. Maybe they thought I'd cool off, let it go, and go right back to playing my part as their personal safety net. But when the days kept passing with no word from me, and more importantly, no money, you could feel the shift in their attitude. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Dad, property taxes are due." That was it. No "hey, how are you?" No "sorry for what happened." Just a cold transactional message, as if I were still their personal ATM. I stared at my phone, almost laughing at how predictable they were. They really thought they could just demand money like nothing had happened, that I'd keep bending over backward for them, even after they made it clear I didn't matter. I typed back, "I'm sure Chase will handle it, since the house is his and all." 5 minutes later, my mom called. I let it ring. A minute after that, another text. "Mom, Logan, please don't be like this. We need to talk." Oh, now they wanted to talk. Now that the bills were piling up and reality was slapping them in the face, suddenly, communication was important. I waited an hour before replying. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now you can live with it." I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I had made my stance crystal clear, and there wasn't a single part of me that felt guilty about it. But then Chase decided to chime in. His text came late that evening, and the second I saw his name pop up on my screen, I knew it was going to be something obnoxious. "Chase, dude, why are you being such a drama queen? It's not a big deal. Just help them out like you always do." I nearly laughed. Not a big deal. He was really acting like I had no right to be mad about this. I typed back, "No, I think you've got it covered. Since you're the favorite and all." Chase, oh my God. "Are you seriously mad about the will?" "Grow up, man. It's just money." Oh, now it was just money. Now that it was his to inherit, suddenly it didn't matter. The hypocrisy was astounding. I shot back. "Then, you won't mind using some of that money to pay the mortgage, right?" Silence. A few minutes later, Mom tried again. This time, full-on guilt trip mode. "Mom, Logan, we're your parents. Family takes care of each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're just abandoning us." I clenched my jaw, breathing through the frustration. Abandoning them. That was rich. I had spent years making sure they never had to struggle, while they coddled Chase and rewarded his laziness. And now, because they had to finally deal with the consequences of their own decisions, I was the bad guy. I responded, "You made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Now Chase can take care of you." I could practically hear my mom's gasp through the phone. She had always been dramatic, always acting like the victim, even when she was the one in the wrong. Then my dad texted again, and this one had me seething. "Dad, we're not asking for much. Just enough to cover the mortgage for a few more months, until we figure things out. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word made my blood boil. I had been bailing them out for years, sacrificing my own money, time, and energy to make their lives easier. I had done everything a good son was supposed to do. And how did they repay me? By making sure I got nothing in return. And now, when I was finally standing up for myself, I was the selfish one? I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and typed back, "Num, I'm done." Then I turned off my phone. The silence lasted a day. I knew they wouldn't give up that easily, but I wasn't expecting what happened next. The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone, a bank transfer request. I frowned, unlocking my phone. It was from my mom. She had actually sent me a request for money, like I was some kind of ATM. The amount, $3,500. I stared at it in disbelief, half laughing at the audacity. No message, no explanation, just a cold, shameless demand for the exact amount they needed to cover their overdue mortgage. They weren't even asking anymore. They were just assuming I'd cave. I declined it, without hesitation. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mom." I let it ring. Then another text. "Mom, Logan, I know you saw the request. Why did you decline it?" I took my time before replying. "Because it's not my responsibility. Try Chase." Another call declined. Then another text. "Mom, we're going to lose the house if you don't help us." Oh, now it was an emergency. Now, after all those years of treating me like a disposable wallet, they were finally feeling the consequences. I typed back, "Maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I didn't matter." A few seconds later, Dad chimed in. Dad, you're really going to let your parents become homeless? That one actually made me laugh out loud. The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost funny. They weren't broke. They weren't about to be thrown on the streets. They just didn't want to dip into their own savings because they were so used to me covering everything. I ignored them for the rest of the day. That night, I got another text. This time, from Chase. Chase, dude, just send them the money already. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. I clenched my jaw. This entitled little prick really thought he could lecture me. I typed back, "You mean the same money you're inheriting? Why don't you send it?" His response came fast. "Chase, you know I don't have that kind of cash right now." Oh, so now it was about affordability. He was perfectly fine with me draining my accounts. But the second it was his turn, suddenly, he had nothing to offer. I replied, "Guess you better figure it out, then. You're the one they chose." No response. I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in years. But the next day, things escalated in a way I never expected. The next day started off normal. I got up, made my coffee, and got ready for work like I always did. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, like I wasn't carrying their problems on my back anymore. But just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. Front desk, "Hey Logan, your parents are here." I froze mid-step, my stomach twisting. You've got to be kidding me. I took a deep breath, gripping my phone like it might snap in half. They actually showed up at my apartment. I ran a hand down my face before typing back, "Don't let them up. I'm not expecting them." Front desk, "They're being kind of pushy." Of course they were. My parents had never handled rejection well. When they wanted something, they didn't ask, they demanded. Not my problem. I shot back, "Tell them to leave." I pocketed my phone and grabbed my keys, but before I could even get out the door, another text came through. "Mom, we're downstairs. Open the door." No please. No explanation. Just another demand. I clenched my jaw, standing there for a moment, debating if I should just leave and let them waste their time. But I knew them. They weren't going anywhere. Fine. They wanted to talk? Let's talk. I stormed downstairs, my blood boiling. As soon as I stepped outside, there they were, Mom, Dad, and of course, Chase, standing together like they were staging some kind of intervention. Mom had her arms crossed, her signature disappointed mother look locked and loaded. Dad stood stiff, hands in his pockets, his expression a mix of frustration and entitlement. And Chase, he had the nerve to look bored, like this was just mildly inconvenient for him, even though he was the reason for all of this. The second Mom saw me, she went full theatrics. "Logan, finally, we need to talk." I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "No, you need to leave." She blinked like she couldn't comprehend what I just said. "Excuse me? You heard me." My voice was calm but firm. "You don't get to just show up at my place demanding money." "That's insane," Dad scoffed. "Are you really going to let us lose the house over a petty grudge?" I let out a cold laugh. "A petty grudge? You mean the one where you decided I was good enough to pay your bills but not good enough to be in your will? That grudge?" Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I had just slapped her. "Logan, that's not fair. We did what we thought was best for the family." I tilted my head. "Best for the family? You mean best for Chase." "Just say it." Silence. Chase, who had been suspiciously quiet up until now, finally spoke. "Look, man, I didn't ask for this. I don't even want to be involved." I turned to him, my patience snapping. "No? You just sit back and take everything that's handed to you. You're 28 years old, Chase. Get a damn job." His face turned red. "Dude, what the hell?" I stepped closer. "You want to inherit the house? Start acting like a homeowner. You want to be the favorite? Start paying their bills. I'm done being your personal bank." Chase looked away, suddenly very interested in the pavement. Mom took a deep breath, recalibrating her guilt trip strategy. "Logan, he's your brother." I nodded. "Yep, and I've supported him more than you ever have." Dad's face darkened. "You're being selfish." I laughed a real, genuine laugh. "Oh, that's rich coming from you." I gestured between them. "You two decided Chase deserved everything and I deserved nothing. And now that the bills are due, you suddenly need me again? Not happening." Mom's voice sharpened. "We thought you'd be mature about this." I raised an eyebrow. "Mature? You mean quietly accept that I was betrayed and keep paying your bills? Because let's be real, that's what you wanted." Dad stepped forward, trying to loom over me like he used to when I was a kid. Logan, we raised you. We fed you, clothed you, gave you everything. The least you can do is help us now. I looked him dead in the eye. I already did, for years. And you repaid me by cutting me out. Mom's lip trembled. We thought you'd understand, I exhaled, shaking my head. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that I was never family to you. Just a paycheck. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then I turned to Chase, who was still pretending to be invisible. And you? What's your excuse? You had years to grow up, to get your life together, to contribute. But you didn't, because you knew they'd take care of you. And now you just expect me to step in? Chase finally snapped. What do you want me to say, man? I didn't ask for this. I nodded slowly. Right, you didn't ask. You just benefited. His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing. He had nothing. Mom tried one last desperate guilt trip. Logan, we're family. Family takes care of each other. I stared at her for a long moment before answering. Exactly. So why didn't you take care of me? She froze. No words, no comeback, nothing. I let out a slow breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. We're done here. I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. Before I even made it back to my couch, my phone buzzed. A new text from Dad. Dad, wow. After everything we've done for you, you're really going to abandon us? I smirked, typing back. Number. You abandoned me. I'm just finally accepting it. I hit send. Then I blocked their numbers. But I had no idea that blocking them was only going to make things worse. Blocking them should have been the end of it. I had made my stance clear: no more bailouts, no more handouts, no more pretending like I didn't know exactly where I stood in their eyes. But if my parents had proven anything over the years, it was that they didn't take no for an answer. Less than a day after I cut them off, I started seeing the posts. At first, I thought it was just my parents being dramatic. They weren't exactly subtle about airing family business when they wanted sympathy. But the more I scrolled, the more I realized they weren't just complaining. They were spinning a whole new story. Mom had posted first. Raising kids is the hardest job in the world, especially when one of them forgets what family truly means. A parent's love is unconditional, but it's heartbreaking when that love isn't returned. We only ever wanted the best for both our sons, but some people only care about money. A dozen of her friends had already commented, offering condolences and outrage. So sorry you're going through this. Kids these days have no respect. I can't believe Logan would do that to you. Dad wasn't far behind. So-called family should never turn their back when you need them the most. We gave everything to our children, and now we're being abandoned. A son should support his parents, not throw them away like garbage. Some people should be ashamed of themselves. He had even tagged me in the post. But the real kicker? The one that nearly made me throw my phone across the room? Chase. Some people think family is just about money. They don't understand that family is about love and sacrifice. I'd do anything for my parents, but not everyone gets that. It's sad when greed takes over. He even threw in a fake, heartfelt line at the end. I just wish some people could see what really matters. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, my pulse hammering in my ears. They had flipped the entire situation on its head. Now I was the bad guy, the selfish son who refused to help his struggling parents, the ungrateful child who didn't appreciate everything they had done for me, the one who had turned his back on them. I forced myself to take a deep breath, then another. I knew I couldn't react right away. That's exactly what they wanted for me to explode, to play into their hands so they could paint me as even worse than they already had. No. If they wanted to drag my name through the mud, I wasn't going to roll over and let it happen. I opened my own account, the one I kept for close friends and people who actually knew me, and I started typing. I wasn't going to say anything, but since my family has decided to spread lies about me, I think it's time to set the record straight. My parents have been telling everyone that I abandoned them when they needed me, that I refused to help them out of greed, that I turned my back on family. But here's the truth. I laid it all out. How I had been the one keeping them afloat for years. How I had paid for their mortgage, their groceries, their bills. How I had done everything a son should do, and then some, while Chase did nothing. How they had rewarded me by leaving everything to him in their will. How they had never even considered me as part of their future, just as someone to keep their lives comfortable in the present. So when I finally set a boundary, when I finally said, no, suddenly, I'm the villain. Suddenly, I'm selfish. Suddenly, They're the victims. Funny how that works. I hit post. Almost immediately, the responses started rolling in. Some of my cousins, who had never really spoken up before, commented things like, "Yeah, that tracks." They always did, baby Chase. A few of my parents' friends, the ones who actually knew what had been going on, sent me private messages saying they were sorry for how my parents were acting. Even some distant relatives chimed in, saying things like, "I always wondered why you were the only one working hard while Chase got a free pass." But the real reactions? Those came from my parents. It didn't take long before my phone started blowing up again. First, a text from Dad. "Dad, how dare you put our private business online?" Then Mom, Logan, take that down. You're making us look bad." Oh, now they cared about looking bad? I ignored them. Then Chase, dude, why would you humiliate Mom and Dad like that? This is so messed up. I smirked, typing back, "You didn't seem to mind when they were lying about me. Sucks when the truth comes out, huh?" No response. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing how this played out. They had spent years controlling the narrative, making me feel like I was the one who had to prove my worth, like I was lucky just to be included at all. Not anymore. That night, I got one final message. "Mom, we just want to talk. Can we please fix this?" I stared at the words on my screen, feeling nothing. No anger, no guilt, no obligation. They had made their choice. And I had made mine, so I did the only thing left to do. I left her on raid. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more guilt, no more being their backup plan, no more bending over backward while they tossed me aside the second I wasn't useful. But my parents weren't the kind of people to let go quietly. At first, it was small things, random calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably borrowed phones since I had blocked them. Then messages through mutual friends, vague but laced with guilt. "Your mom is really struggling with all of this. Your dad doesn't understand why you're being so harsh." I ignored it. But then, they escalated. It started when my landlord called. "Hey, Logan, your parents just showed up at the office, said they needed to talk to you." I nearly dropped my phone. "Wait, what?" "They asked for your apartment number," he continued, sounding uneasy. Obviously, I didn't give it to them, but dude, they're still out in the parking lot. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just texts or online drama anymore. They were trying to corner me in real life. "Don't let them in," I said firmly. "I don't want them anywhere near my place." "I figured," he said. "I told them to leave, but they said they'll wait until you come to your senses." Of course they did. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temple. "If they don't leave, call the cops." That must have done the trick, because by the time I got home that night, they were gone. But the next morning, the messages started again. "Mom, we waited for you. We just want to talk." "Dad, this has gone too far, Logan. We're your parents." Then Chase, bro, just stop. "You're being ridiculous." I could have ignored them. I probably should have. But I was sick of the games, so I texted Chase back. "Me, how am I being ridiculous?" "Chase, Mom and Dad are freaking out." "You're seriously cutting them off over some money?" I clenched my jaw. "Me, no, I'm cutting them off because they treated me like a walking ATM while handing you everything. Funny how it wasn't just money when it was their way of rewarding you." "Chase, you're so dramatic. You have a good job, dude. You don't need an inheritance." There it was again. The same excuse. The same reasoning that had justified them screwing me over. "Me, you're right. I don't need the inheritance. But that's not the point. The point is, they never once considered me. The point is, they used me until they didn't have to anymore. And now that they actually have to face the consequences, they expect me to clean up their mess." Silence. For the first time, Chase didn't have a comeback. I let out a slow breath. Maybe finally he understood. But I had underestimated him, because the next day, my boss called me into his office. And the second I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. "Logan," he started, folding his hands on his desk. "I got a strange call this morning from someone claiming to be your father." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" He nodded. "He said he was concerned about your mental state and wanted to make sure your job wasn't too stressful for you." I stared at him, barely processing the words. "I didn't say much," my boss continued carefully, "but I wanted to let you know. It felt off. That was putting it lightly." My father had actually called my workplace, trying to sabotage me, trying to paint me as unstable, maybe hoping they'd pressure me to reach out, or worse, fire me so I'd come crawling back, desperate and dependent again. I gritted my teeth. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. My boss shook his head. You don't have to say anything. Just take care of yourself. And if this happens again, let me know. I nodded stiffly, standing up. My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I thought I'd seen every manipulative trick my parents had, but this was a new low. That night, I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called a lawyer. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about the inheritance. It was about boundaries, about making sure they could never pull something like this again. The lawyer was calm, straightforward. You have a few options, she told me. A cease and desist letter is the easiest. If they keep harassing you, you can escalate it legally. I scheduled the letter to be sent the next day, and when my parents received it, all hell broke loose. The cease and desist letter landed like a bomb. I knew it the second my phone started buzzing nonstop, first from Mom, then Dad, then Chase. I didn't even have to read the messages to know the tone: rage, disbelief, and, of course, the classic guilt tripping. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. They had spent their entire lives believing they could manipulate me into doing what they wanted, that if they pushed hard enough, I'd fold, that if they threw a big enough tantrum, I'd cave just to keep the peace. Not this time. I had drawn my line, and I was done explaining myself. The next morning, I got another text from Chase. Chase, dude, you actually got a lawyer involved? Are you serious? Me, dead serious. Chase, you're insane. They're our parents. Me, no, they're your parents. I was just their backup plan. Silence. And for the first time, I felt something shift. Not just in the situation, but in me. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. But of course, they weren't. Because 2 days later, I got home from work and found an envelope shoved under my door. No return address. Just my name scrawled in my mom's familiar handwriting. For a second, I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, front and back, written in her neat, careful script. Logan, it started. I don't even know who you are anymore. The son I raised would never turn his back on family. The son I raised would understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the people you love. But I guess I was wrong about you. I exhaled sharply, already knowing where this was going. We are your parents. We gave you everything. We loved you, cared for you, raised you. And now, when we need you most, you've abandoned us. Over money. Over something so meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Same script, different day. Chase was always weaker than you. You were always the strong one. We thought you'd understand that he needed more help. That's why we did what we did. It was never about not loving you. It was about protecting him. I clenched my jaw, protecting him. Not once did they think I needed protecting. Not once did they consider that maybe I was tired of being strong, that maybe I deserved something too. I hope one day you come to your senses. I hope one day you look back and realize what you've done. Family is everything, Logan. And right now, you're throwing it all away. I folded the letter carefully, set it on the table, and just stared at it for a long moment. And then I threw it in the trash, not out of anger, not out of spite, because I finally understood. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I think, in their own twisted way, they did, but they had never respected me. They had never seen me as someone with needs of my own, only as someone who could meet theirs. And the second I stopped, I became the villain. I wasn't playing that role anymore. The next few weeks were quiet. No more messages, no more surprise visits, no more family drama spilling onto my social media. It was almost eerie. Then, one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Chase, Mom and Dad are selling the house. I stared at the screen for a long moment, reading the words over and over. I should have felt something. Relief, victory, vindication. But all I felt was nothing. They had made their choice, and now they were finally dealing with the consequences. I typed back one last message. Me, good. Now they can finally take care of themselves. I hit send. Then, for the first time in my life, I blocked him, and just like that, I was free. Story 2. During his cousin's birthday celebration, My ailing kid was confined in her chilly basement by his sister. Her husband now forbids her from seeing their child, and her father is taking her out of his trust money. Everything went awry when my son went to my nephew's birthday celebration a few days ago. They are both 8 years old. A number of their pals attended this party prior to the party, and they attend the same school. I had repeatedly questioned him whether he truly wanted to go because he had been feeling a little under the weather, but he claimed that he felt well enough to travel. He wasn't looking too awful, just a bit worn out, so I let him. I decided to drop him off to my sister's house since I thought he would feel better being with his buddies. After that, my wife and I went out to see a movie and run some errands. Meanwhile, I spent nearly 3 hours phoning my sister to inquire about my son's well-being. I would definitely give him a call to see how he was doing, because I had already told her that he hadn't been feeling well before to the party. However, each time I phoned, she would just ignore me as the phone continued to ring. I even sent my son an SMS on his emergency phone. However, I subsequently learned that my sister had taken it away at the start of the actual party, since, reportedly, she has a strict no-screen policy at home. She also refused to let him call me when he became really ill and wanted his phone back. When I still couldn't get through to him after nearly 3 hours, my wife and I began to have doubts about whatever was going on. So, since it was getting late, we just decided to stop by and pick him up. People had already begun to leave the home when we arrived, and just a few children remained as we went inside. When I questioned my sister why our son wasn't in the living room with the other children, she seemed rather uncomfortable. Suddenly, she said she would go fetch him and requested us both to remain in the living room. However, I came to the conclusion that something was seriously off because my son was in the living room with the other children. I decided to follow her, despite her insistence that I simply remain in the living room. However, my wife and I followed after her, and while we were walking, she began to explain that my son had supposedly been quite ill during the party and wanted to contact me, but she didn't think he was telling the truth, because that's what kids do. She assumed he was simply putting it on to get attention. She became quite irate with him when he began to press and badger her, and she put him in timeout in the basement since she believed he would spoil her weeks of preparation for her son's birthday celebration. Because she was too preoccupied with the party, she didn't answer my calls or let him phone me, and she had completely forgotten about him until we arrived. That explains why she had been acting so tense. As she described everything, I naturally became agitated, and I forced her to get to the basement so we could check on my baby and she could open up. Fortunately, he is now well, but when we discovered him, he was shivering, sniffling nonstop, and nearly comatose. He had also repeatedly puked on the basement floor. We didn't spend any time in getting him to the emergency room of the closest hospital, because we could not risk it, even if he was perfectly healthy. I didn't have time for questions, so my sister chose to get into her car and drive behind us, leaving her husband to take care of the other guests we had left through the kitchen door. Although I had asked my sister not to accompany us to the hospital, because she was the last person I wanted to see, she nevertheless showed up while we were in the waiting room. She apologized again to us both, but we chose to ignore her. After some time, when the doctor was seeing how her son was doing, I noticed that my dad and my brother-in-law had also appeared in the sky. They both asked us what was happening. My sister had reportedly told her husband that she was in the hospital, but she hadn't even told them what was going on, until every visitor had departed. When they arrived, my sister was going to reassure them that everything was well, but I went all out and told them what had occurred. I was furious. The way she came across in this episode didn't matter to me at all, and naturally, her husband and my father were appalled. The explanation that appeared to make sense was that she had lied to all of the visitors, claiming that my son had gone by the kitchen exit and I had picked him up because he was feeling a little ill, but that it was nothing serious and that no one needed to worry about him. Since what she had done was plainly quite insane and nobody would have thought of it, no one even had any suspicions after I'd been honest with them. My brother-in-law began arguing with her, accusing her of being insane, and so on. However, my dad became silent for a few minutes before turning to face my sister and telling her that, although he had been thinking about creating a trust fund for the two of us in the future, he would now only be giving everything to me and the grandchildren. He would see to it that she didn't get anything. This abrupt announcement somewhat stunned us all, and my sister began weeping a few seconds later, but no one felt sorry for her. My son is doing a lot better now after a few days, although he still feels a bit frightened. Spending as much time as possible with him is how we're attempting to address it. However, in recent days, my sister has also been pleading with me to make things right and attempt to speak with our father, since she believes that this is an excessively severe penalty for what she did. Even her spouse purposefully keeps their child away from her and doesn't speak to her at the moment. I don't really care that she has apologized at least 1,000,000 times by now. She is unable to undo the terrible act she has already done. In the back of my mind, though, I also find it strange that my dad has chosen to remove her from the trust fund because, at first, he had only named his 2 grandchildren, and we were both okay with that. However, I'm now also a part of it. The new beneficiary is myself, and I'm not sure. I'm having trouble understanding it, and it simply seems strange. Basically, I want to know why my sister was excluded from this because of what she did, and why my dad allowed me and his grandchildren to be named as beneficiaries of the trust money. One update. Hello, everyone. I want to start by saying how much I appreciate all of the comments. Now that my kid is doing so well, we are really appreciative of how many people appear to be interested in him. We also appreciate all of the support and care that we have received from the comments. It's very kind of you all. Anyway, in light of recent events, I have made the decision to block my sister. Now that a week has passed since the party, I believe she should consider herself fortunate that we have chosen not to take legal action against her or the reporter for this, even though I believe we could. Right now, we just don't need the drama. Pursuing this will be very costly and time-consuming, and it is simply not worth it. Although it has just recently come up, we have been discussing the possibility of reporting her to CPS. To be honest, we weren't really considering what to do about her, which is why I didn't bring it up in my last article. My son and the entire trust fund problem were my main concerns. I never even considered the possibility that I would need to report her and all that, but because she has a boy of her own, I believe it would be wise to do so. She occasionally hosts other children, and I don't believe it's a good idea for her to be dealing with that at the moment. It is obvious that she is now experiencing some sort of issue. I'm not sure what it is, but this is not how regular people act. Therefore, if I do report her to CPS, they could recommend counseling or something, and she will be more equipped to handle her problems going forward. It will benefit her in the long term. In addition, a few people questioned me about why I had allowed her to text me in the first place and why I hadn't just blocked her. To be honest, I was just having a moment of weakness. Following the death of our mother a few years ago, my sister, dad, and I grew close. I left my son with her at the birthday celebration and went out with my wife for the evening since I trusted her sufficiently. Since I usually don't let my son spend hours at someone's house without giving it some thought, I would have spent the entire evening with them if I hadn't trusted her. Since we had been close for a few years, blocking her was a little challenging for me, particularly since she was also dealing with all of this in her personal life. I felt a mixture of sadness for her and anger over what she had done to my son, because I am both her brother and a father. I felt quite bewildered, and there were a lot of contradictory emotions. Thus, I hadn't yet blocked her. However, I don't believe I need to consider any of this anymore. Even if it was a sincere error, I don't have to feel sorry for her. People simply cannot afford to make it with children. People may be permanently scarred by these things, and perhaps she shouldn't be hosting children at her house in the first place if she has the common sense to realize that. In any case, we may report her to CPS once I talk to my dad today. Although it won't be simple, I really believe that this must be done, since what she did was incredibly careless and terrible for anybody, not just a 7-year-old child. And just because she's my sister doesn't mean I can ignore this. If someone else had been in her shoes, I doubt I would have even considered reporting them, but only for her. We had been assuming the best about her. Sadly, I don't believe that apologies will suffice in this case. Update 2. My wife and I just had dinner with my dad, and it has been a few hours since my last update. We mentioned to him that we had been debating whether or not to report my sister to CPS. Since she is still his daughter, he may still be angry with her, but I'm not sure whether he would be amenable to anything like this because it's so important, so I wasn't sure how he would respond to it. He considered it for some time. He advised us to do what we believe is right, which surprised me because I had assumed he would counsel us against doing this, and we should definitely report her to CPS if we believe it is necessary. He told us that he had seen my sister being short with her own child several times in the past and was extremely honest about the entire thing. When he was around, she would occasionally lose it over something really minor and important, but most of the time she would be quite pleasant and composed. She would then attempt to console her kid when he cried. However, it was evident that she struggled to suppress her anger at my son. It simply became unsightly. Additionally, he had often suggested that she seek counseling, attend parenting classes, and simply figure out a healthy way to handle her. Sincerely, children will be children. Children will make mistakes all the time. They will not be flawless or easy to work with, and they will make a lot of blunders. However, as parents, we cannot afford to constantly frighten and make kids feel horrible. Although she promised to take action, she never did. After this episode, my dad said he had had enough and that he ought to have discussed it with her more seriously. However, he never imagined that this is how things would turn out. I don't even hold it against him since I don't believe anyone could have predicted that he would act in this manner. Until someone does something like that, we don't even presume that they are capable of such things. Ultimately, though, my father gave me the all clear, and he believed that we should make the final decision because our child had to experience this. Furthermore, there was no need to seek guidance on this matter. Naturally, though, an inquiry will take place, and he will be completely honest if questioned about anything. That was a relief then. Additionally, I sincerely hope that my sister will cooperate with CPS so that she can get away with it. And to be honest, that's the aim here. She shouldn't get into any problems, in my opinion. All I want is for her to recover and gain knowledge from this. I discussed the trust fund with my father as well. Knowing that it was initially only for the grandchildren, I informed him that I had felt a little uncomfortable about it. However, Dad informed me that he had been considering making my sister and I beneficiaries as well for some time, and had intended to surprise us with the news on Christmas. His business has been doing quite well, and because he doesn't require much and leads a very modest lifestyle, he ends up saving a lot of money. He thus believes that adding me as a beneficiary is reasonable, and no one can tell him what to do since it's his money, notwithstanding my sister's opinion that it is unjust. She will simply have to cope with it, because it's still the case that her actions on the day of the party were just unacceptable. Additionally, my father brought up the fact that she is not going to be unable to make ends meet with the money she now earns. She works as a woman. Her husband works as well, and the two of them earn a respectable living. He will thus remain around for a long time, and she will be just fine. He is in quite excellent health, so it's not like I'll be receiving the trust fund money anytime soon. I don't need to worry about that now because it will happen a long time from now. I felt much better after talking to him about it, and I no longer feel as guilty. Furthermore, I don't believe that I ever needed to feel bad about it. I wasn't doing anything incorrectly, really. My father wasn't coerced or forced to do that by me. I won't worry about this being unfair or anything else anymore, because he did this on his own initiative. I simply will no longer put myself through unnecessary stress, because it is simply not worth it. It's unfortunate if my sister feels bad about any of this, but she ought to have given it some serious thought. And that concludes my thoughts on this. In any case, I'm happy I had dinner with my dad and discussed all of these issues with him because it truly provided me with the clarity I now needed. My wife and I are both aware of what has to be done, and we will go with it. All we can hope for is that everything ends well and that things don't go out of hand. I sincerely hope that my sister would own up to her faults, express regret, and take action to make things right. The third update. Hello, everyone. Many people told me after my previous update that I didn't need to report my sister to CPS since my child was secure, and I didn't need to worry about anything at the moment. However, as I previously stated, this was not about retaliating against or putting my sister into trouble. It all came down to doing the right thing. I was confident that she would comply if she was genuinely sorry for the circumstance. I also spoke with a buddy who works closely with CPS, so I understood that because my child was secure for now, they probably wouldn't pursue this further. As a foster care provider, I understood that things might go wrong very quickly, so I also did my own research before taking this action. But in the end, it came down to doing the right thing, because she occasionally hosts children and has a child of her own. Nevertheless, I went ahead and reported her. And of course, the caseworker that got in touch with us did ask us why there was such a delay, and we had to explain that since it was my sister that we were talking about. I had been unsure about whether or not I should do this, but now I felt secure in my choice. In the 2 weeks that have passed, the caseworker has also contacted my sister. He did spoke to me and my wife. Whatever occurred, we told him all about it. After that, my son was also spoken to separately. Although he was a little anxious, he told everyone what had happened. We also showed her the ER's medical records and the subsequent medical appointment, which verified that my son's severe case of food poisoning had been an emergency. My sister should have taken it seriously even if it wasn't her fault. Then, 6 days after we spoke, my sister was visited, and based on what I've heard, she was quite sorry and helpful. She was truly crying at the end. However, she remained true to herself and did not make a huge issue out of her feelings. The caseworker was shown about the residence, and although the basement was not particularly dangerous, it was quite chilly. The caseworker informed us that they will contact their supervisor and promptly notify us of the outcome. We made an effort to persuade her to tell us what would happen, but she informed us that she did not have complete control over the choice. She was only able to provide suggestions, but she would undoubtedly suggest that because my sister had been extremely helpful and contrite during the appointment, and she could infer from the preliminary inquiry and results that, although it was awful, it had most likely only happened once. In response to our request, she would recommend to her supervisor that my sister take parenting classes and therapy, notwithstanding the fact that the decision is yet unknown. I'm praying this doesn't get out of hand, and that's what happens. Post 4. A week and a half has passed since my last post, and a few days ago, the caseworker contacted us once again to inform us that a decision had been made, and, happily, that our recommendations had been taken into consideration. My sister shown a strong desire to change, and even her husband and kid acknowledged that although she does have anger problems, they would do all in their power to ensure that it doesn't happen again. After considering all of that, it was determined that she would need to go to parenting classes and therapy sessions, and nothing was thought to be better. She was not allowed to interact with my son in any way without my supervision. We are okay with it, because the last part is already not occurring, and that we are grateful that this has come out precisely how we had hoped. This is it for the time being, but the caseworker will continue to communicate with my sister and us to keep a careful eye on the family dynamic. My sister hasn't tried to get in touch with me or talk to me yet, and the same is true for my brother-in-law. The last I heard, he was avoiding her and attempting to keep his son away from her, so I'm not even sure if they are speaking to each other yet. However, I am hoping that things are better in their house right now, because he has supported her during this period. This has been extremely stressful for all of us, not just my sister and I, and now that we have a decision, we can finally breathe again. I have been keeping my father informed throughout the entire process. In our family, this is most likely the first time something like has ever occurred. Naturally, we are not accustomed to handling such situations, so this was all we could think about until we made a decision. However, I'm glad we were able to resolve the issue amicably. Mostly, I'm simply happy that my sister has made the decision to get therapy and better herself. My son is essentially back to his usual self. At school, he is playing, laughing, jumping, and doing all the things that children his age do. Regardless of the circumstances between my sister and I, he is also spending time with my nephew, which is truly how things should be. We have not allowed the children to be impacted by whatever equation exists between us at the moment. Since my child and her son attend the same school, there have been some inquiries regarding it, so I believe it's time for me to address it as well. I didn't bring it up earlier since I had more important things to discuss. Since they are very close and it is only natural for them to contact frequently, their bond has remained unbroken. When my kid wanted to go over to my nephew's apartment to play with him after school, I had no issues with it at all. I was simply relieved that they were blissfully oblivious to their parents' problems. Since I wasn't sure if my sister would want me there or not, I had to somewhat disappoint him there because I couldn't take him, of course. Apart from that, though, I was happy to hear that their friendship was still going strong. I wasn't sure at first if my sister would want her son spending more time with my kid, but she hasn't had any issues either. Therefore, the first believe we have reached a point where we can leave them alone. And despite their little size, I believe it's crucial to respect their desires as well. My son has often expressed his desire for things to return to their previous state. So when things settle down a bit, I believe I will eventually visit her home and let the children to play together. Now that he is no longer afraid of his aunt, he wants to visit and spend time with his cousin. He may easily forget about it, for his sake, not so much for us. If not at her house, I'll attempt to speak with my sister to see if she's amenable to the concept of them having playdates as they used to. Since we used to occasionally do it together, she can always have her husband drop off my nephew at my house. In any case, I believe that we should simply leave things alone for the time being, but I will surely attempt to take action in the future, since I don't want to let my kid down or lead him to break up his relationship with his cousin. Regardless of the intricacies of their family and everything else, I want them to maintain their strong connection. The fifth update. Hey, a few months have passed. Although we haven't completely returned to our previous routine, my sister and I have resumed our dates after I talked to her about our kids. Naturally, she still doesn't interact with my son unattended, as recommended by the caseworker, and we are ensuring that. She is also attempting to regulate her temper by going to parenting programs and counseling sessions. She has also informed me that, despite her apology, she was upset to learn that I had reported her to CPS. She understands my reasoning, though, and she doesn't believe our relationship can return to normal. But for the benefit of our children, she will continue to strive. And I concur with her. Although I firmly believe that things will never return to their former state, we will make every effort to do so for the sake of our children. Additionally, she is going to marriage therapy with her spouse. My brother-in-law informed me about it and stated that he had been really angry with her at first, but now we are on speaking terms again. He refused to speak with her or even allow her to be near his son. However, he eventually came to the conclusion that the family would only suffer from this type of tactless treatment. So he made the decision to handle it. They have also made the decision to attempt to resolve their differences because he does not want a divorce. Right now, everything is going great for them, and I'm really delighted for them. My sister and father have yet to communicate with one another. She denies his existence, and he declines to speak to her initially. I'm not sure what will happen there, but as I already stated, I won't worry about anything that isn't directly related to me. Since they are both adults, they will try to resolve their differences if they so want. I'm simply thankful that everything in the family is doing well for the time being. Story 3. I presented a video of my sister admitting to infidelity after she made fun of my plain engagement ring at my party. My parents chose to cut me off when her fiancé departed. I've always known that, at 27, I was living in my sister Sarah's 29-foot shadow. For as long as I can remember, things have been that way. Sarah was a straight-A cheerleader, homecoming queen, and the ideal daughter while growing up in a Massachusetts suburb. Her greatest admirers were my parents, who were both prosperous lawyers. They made sure I understood that Sarah was the one creating waves by continuously praising her achievements. She later moved to Boston to work in marketing, where every accomplishment was hailed as though it were an Olympic gold medal. That wasn't me. I wasn't the family's star, and I discovered early on that my nursing school graduation and pediatric nursing certification were respectable, but insufficient. Even though I didn't receive the same level of attention as Sarah, I still enjoyed what I did. I like working with kids and seeing the tangible impact of my efforts. However, it made no difference to me how satisfying it was. I would always be the inferior daughter, the one who didn't quite measure up to my parents. When I met James 2 years ago, my life began to change. He is a pediatric oncologist, and we became friends while I was a resident. We clicked right away. James shares my enthusiasm for working with kids and is patient and compassionate. He proposed to me when we were on a Cape Cod weekend last month. It was flawless. He presented me with a simple ring. Not at all. It was his grandmother's heirloom. Simple, yet brimming with sentimentality. I adored it. In the meanwhile, Sarah had spent 4 years with Marcus, a financial executive. During the previous 2 years, she had been hinting about getting married. Unsubtly, she would imply that Marcus was considering rings while showcasing several engagement ring designs to our mother. Sarah, like everyone else in our family, assumed she would be the first to marry. She had always been the golden kid, after all, and I suspect she thought marriage was just another thing to cross off her list. After achieving specific professional benchmarks, Sarah's response to James and my announcement of our engagement was peculiar. As if our huge news wasn't enough, she congratulated us and then abruptly turned the topic to a recent promotion. I assumed, however, that she was simply taken aback. Perhaps she didn't think I would get engaged first. On the other hand, my parents were overjoyed and even offered to throw an engagement party at their home. I was thrilled and hoped that perhaps this party would be the day that Sarah and I would no longer have this strange tension. Last weekend was the engagement celebration, and I will always remember what transpired. Initially, everything was going smoothly. James's co-workers, friends, and family joined in the celebration. The concept of me getting married first seemed to be gaining traction with Sarah. She inquired about our wedding plans, appreciated the decor, and engaged in courteous small conversation. However, things changed as the evening wore on. Sarah's mood changed as a result of her excessive drinking. She began to say things that were passive-aggressive, especially concerning my engagement ring. She once quipped, "Oh, I guess some people don't mind a modest ring as long as they're engaged, in front of a crowd. Whatever brings you joy, isn't that right?" I tried to ignore the fact that it hurt and that it was a cheap shot. Because of its history, the ring held immense meaning for me, and I wasn't going to allow her to sabotage it. During the toasts, things became heated. Initially, it appeared that Sarah would only congratulate James on me when she grabbed the microphone to speak. Then her tone shifted. She began by expressing surprise that I was getting married first. I had usually taken my time with things, so I said it was surprising. People began to appear uneasy as the room grew silent. Then she said it. "I suppose you have to get married quickly when you're a low-value lady. What other person would wed a doctor who spends more time caring for ailing children than his own fiancée?" I felt ashamed. I could feel James by my side, fuming with rage, and the whole room was gazing at me. Marcus seems to want to vanish. As like she had won some perverse contest, Sarah simply stood there grinning. I lost my temper at that point. You see, Sarah's former college boyfriend had contacted me 2 months prior. He wanted to catch up after learning that I was getting engaged via a mutual acquaintance. He showed me a video during our talk that fundamentally altered my perception of my sister. Sarah, who was clearly intoxicated, confessed on the video of cheating on him with his best friend and using the money from their joint housing fund to purchase expensive clothing. I had no intention of doing anything with it when it was recorded 6 years ago. However, I was unable to control myself as I stood there, feeling totally destroyed by my own sister at what was meant to be my celebration. I played the video after pairing my phone with the Bluetooth speakers. As Sarah's voice filled the room, admitting to her theft and infidelity, the room fell silent. A pin could be heard dropping. Without saying a word, Marcus, who had been standing off to the side, quietly left the room. Shocked, Sarah Palin started crying and fled too. My parents were shocked. Soon after, the party came to an end. My parents drew me away. They were furious and said I had ruined Sarah's life and humiliated her. They told me that I had gone too far and demanded to know why I had done something so cruel. My mom insisted, and my dad said I had embarrassed our family. I immediately apologized to Sarah. They told me that, unless I publicly apologized to her, they would not support me or come to my wedding. Everything has gotten out of hand since then. On social media, Sarah has been sharing ambiguous, exaggerated posts about poisonous family members and treachery. Family members have been bombarding my email with messages. Some have been encouraging, while others have accused me of being petty and nasty. It's now obvious that Sarah is fabricating the tale to show me as the bad guy and herself as the victim. My parents will not talk to me until I apologize, and they are completely on her side. James has been my pillar of support over this entire ordeal. Although he supports me and understands why I did what I did, he is concerned about the impact this is having on my relationship with my family. We ought to be organizing our wedding, but instead I'm juggling the consequences of this huge family conflict. I'm torn. A part of me is aware that Sarah should be held responsible for her deeds. Because everyone supported her actions, she has gotten away with a lot over the years. However, I also question whether I went too far. It feels like I may have ruined my connection with my parents, even though I never intended to do so. I've been attempting to choose my next course of action. James and I are still planning our wedding, though it's hard to be enthused about it with everything going on. We're meant to be celebrating our engagement, but instead I'm left cleaning up the pieces of a family that feels irreversibly broken. My parents have stated unequivocally that they would not attend my wedding or be involved in my life unless I apologize, apparently. But how can I say I'm sorry when I know the true problem is Sarah's actions? How can I ignore everything and act as though she hasn't harmed me and countless others? With the exception of the social media posts, Sarah has not spoken since the party. She has not contacted me personally, and I don't think she will. She's never been one to own up to her mistakes, and I'm beginning to question whether she ever will. Mutual acquaintances claim that Marcus hasn't spoken to her since the party, and I'm not sure what will happen to their relationship. Naturally, my parents are attempting to make it seem as though I am the one who has wrecked everything. They often insist that family should come first, but how can I prioritize them when they won't even consider my point of view? I have no idea what the future will bring. James and I are proceeding with our wedding preparations, but it seems like a massive cloud is looming over everything. I can't apologize for standing up for myself, even if I love my parents and am saddened by their decision to support Sarah. I can't act as though her actions were okay. They could change their minds eventually, or they might not. All I know is that right now I need to concentrate on what's best for James and myself. Without this drama looming over us, we deserve to begin our lives together. All I want is for things to not have to be this way. But sometimes, even if it means losing the people you believed would always support you, you have to stand up for yourself. One update: I appreciate all of your tremendous help and guidance. I wanted to provide an update on everything that has transpired since the engagement party, because this whole situation has been getting out of hand over the last few days. Marcus gave me a call yesterday. I wanted to hear what he had to say, but I wasn't expecting it, especially after all that happened. Marcus sounded composed but worn out, as if he had been reflecting a lot. He informed me that he was very awakened by Sarah's actions during the party. He had been doubting their connection for some time, but he hadn't believed he had enough evidence or clarity to take any action. The last straw was the video. Sarah had apparently been pressuring him to get married for a while. She teases him, talks about the wedding all the time, and even makes him look at engagement rings. She wasn't exactly behaving like she was ready for commitment, though. Marcus revealed that she had been making advances on his coworkers during company functions, which unnerved him even though it never turned into a serious situation. Every time he had attempted to discuss it with her, she had dismissed it as lighthearted banter or accused him of being insecure. For him, it was a warning sign that she saw nothing wrong with it, and he knew it was time to go after the party. Marcus informed me that he had already moved out of their flat and ended his relationship with Sarah. He was obviously still taking it all in, but he appeared relieved. He acknowledged that for some time, he had been plagued by the notion that something wasn't quite right. But he didn't come to terms with the reality until the video and Sarah's public outburst. He expressed his gratitude to me for revealing Sarah's true nature, claiming that it provided him with the insight he needed to break up a failing relationship. To be honest, I was happy for him since he appeared content with his choice. However, my folks were going in the opposite direction from Marcus's. Later that day, my mom phoned, and the call didn't go well. She informed me that Sarah had to take time off work due to worry, and had been sobbing herself to sleep. Mom claims that Sarah was upset and that I was solely to blame. They were upset that I had made fun of her in front of everyone, and they now expected me to assist repair Sarah's reputation in addition to offering a public apology. Mom even recommended that I explain to everyone that the video was misinterpreted, that Sarah's remarks were only an error from her youth, and that she hadn't meant them. I refused to lie to Sarah in order to protect her, even though she wanted me to minimize the situation as though it were a simple mistake. Not with all that she had done. The fact that my parents are still so intent on preserving Sarah's reputation and denying her involvement in the matter is really annoying. They continue to pamper her as if she were a perfect child. I'm supposed to clean up the mess, though. Even worse, after learning about what had transpired from common acquaintances, Sarah's college ex, the one in the video, contacted me. Sarah's efforts to hide it horrified him. She had apparently gotten in touch with him and begged him to deny the video's authenticity. Naturally, He declined and assured me that he still stands by his statements in the video. He even offered to correct the record by speaking with my parents on my behalf, but I don't think that would help. I don't think anything could convince my parents to change their beliefs at this time, since they are so firmly in denial. James and I have made the decision to proceed with our wedding arrangements despite all of this craziness. For next spring, we have located a stunning location on the North Shore. Charming, cozy, and ideal for the type of event we desire. It is everything I had ever imagined. Additionally, I made a very difficult decision that, in light of the situation, felt correct. Instead of Sarah, I've asked my best friend to be my maid of honor. It was a difficult decision. However, I don't think I can rely on Sarah to be there for me on such a significant day after everything that has transpired. I need individuals who genuinely care about me, and that's not her at the moment. Even if my parents continue their boycott, several of our relatives have already stated that they would be at the wedding. To be honest, I was afraid I would have a guest list that was completely empty. So, that has been a big relief. James has also received tremendous support from his parents. In the event that my parents don't give up, they have even volunteered to assist with planning. Knowing that we have individuals on our side has been consoling. Even if they don't include my own parents, the emotional toll is beginning to get to me in spite of everything. I've been caught between the grief of maybe losing my family and defending myself. Even though James has supported me through everything, he is aware of how much it is impacting me. I've made the decision to begin seeing a therapist in order to process everything. Tomorrow is my first visit, and I'm hoping it will help me work through my emotions. I had no regrets about confronting Sarah. It was time for someone to hold her responsible for her behavior, since she has been getting away with too much for too long. However, the idea of being separated from my parents for a long time is difficult to accept. I always saw them attending my wedding, accompanying me down the aisle, and taking in the happiness of the occasion. I'm attempting to accept the fact that the image seems to be vanishing right now. James has proposed eloping in order to escape the situation. Although I can appreciate his perspective, I'm not prepared for it. Having a traditional wedding with my family at my side has always been my desire, and a part of me continues to hope that they will change their mind. However, I'm also beginning to see that I should prioritize my happiness, not on meeting the demands of a family that doesn't accept logic. I'm taking each day as it comes for the time being. I'm proceeding with the wedding preparations, attempting to make sense of everything that has happened and relying on those who are helping me. It's not simple. Even if the road ahead seems unclear, I'm committed to navigating this on my own. The most important thing is that I have James by my side, even if it means going down the aisle without my parents. Update 2. The situation has gotten much worse than I could have ever envisioned. The wife of Sarah's ex-boyfriend learned a few days earlier that Sarah had been attempting to persuade him to reject the veracity of the video. Sarah had apparently been adamant, even pleading with him to fabricate the video. What truly caught me off guard, though, was what happened next. Sarah had even offered to make it worthwhile for him if he would assist her in hiding her falsehoods. The wife, however, was not amenable to it. She had no intention of allowing Sarah to control her husband. Rather than remain silent, she published screenshots of Sarah's conversations in our group chat for extended family. It was shocking. As family members read Sarah's frantic attempts to hide her history, the conversation descended into anarchy. The most upsetting aspect was witnessing Sarah's extreme self-defense and disregard for others. Everyone was in disbelief as the messages spread. Finally speaking out was my aunt, who has always been one of the most composed and level-headed members of the family. She disclosed that, in order to prevent family strife, she had remained silent despite having seen Sarah's deceptive actions for years. Sarah has apparently been doing this kind of thing for a while. According to my aunt, Sarah had distributed false information about relatives who excelled in their jobs or studies, and had even claimed credit for other family members' accomplishments. The sheer number of family members who shared tales of Sarah's manipulations was startling. Although I had always known that my parents preferred her, I was unaware of the extent of this tendency. Tale after tale was told regarding Sarah's entitlement and selfishness. However, no one had ever ventured to face her head-on. In order to keep everyone from upsetting my parents, It seemed as though they had established the norm that Sarah was untouchable. Despite this information, my parents continued to deny Sarah's actions. Rather, they strengthened their stance. My parents contacted me once again, a few days after the screenshots were made public, but they gave me an ultimatum instead of the apologies or comprehension I was expecting for. They threatened to take me away from them if I didn't publicly apologize to Sarah. It felt like a stomach punch. As though that wasn't sufficient, they agreed to delay my wedding until Sarah had had time to find happiness again, and insisted that I issue a public statement claiming the video was deceptive. I just am at a loss for words. How were they unable to recognize the true situation? They had lost all sense of reality because they were so focused on keeping Sarah safe. They didn't care that she tried to coerce her ex into lying for her, or that she had made fun of me at my own engagement party. They were just concerned about protecting Sarah's reputation. They refused to recognize their beloved golden kid for who she truly was, as if they were ignorant to the reality. James has been outstanding. He has only been encouraging. His coworkers at the hospital have been excellent, despite the fact that I can tell the situation is wearing on him. In fact, a number of them chose to skip a medical conference where the public relations was being handled by Sarah's marketing firm. They had no interest in getting involved with anything related to Sarah after learning of the incident. She claims that I ruined her career because this choice apparently caused her to have issues at work. Ironically, I hadn't even had a conversation with anyone at her firm. But in Sarah's head, of course, I'm somehow at blame for everything awful that occurs to her. Sarah, meantime, has been acting like the victim on the internet. More mysterious posts regarding familial betrayal and the need for individuals to get over their pettiness have been made by her. She is obviously taking pleasure in the attention and portraying herself as the victim of this whole situation. She hasn't contacted me personally yet, and I don't think she will. She's so preoccupied with making me the bad guy to even think about owning up to her mistakes. It was sad, but I had a lengthy session with my dad in the hopes that we may finally work things out. Family is everything, he informed me, and I was the one destroying our family by not saying I was sorry. He also said that Sarah had always supported me and that I was giving her back by damaging her reputation and making her appear unlikable in front of everyone. I had the impression that I was being gaslighted. Nobody was recognizing how devastated I was by Sarah. I had no one to defend myself. For the purpose of maintaining harmony, they seemed to want me to ignore everything, apologize, and go on. I came away from the conversation feeling even more torn. To put an end to the drama, I wanted to give in. However, I also realized that doing so would simply serve to support Sarah's actions and the notion that she was infallible. Since it wasn't my fault, I couldn't bring myself to apologize. Not with all that she had done. James and I need to be concentrating on getting married and starting our lives. But instead, we're caught up in this never-ending drama with my family. It is tiring, and I am realizing that no matter what I do, I may never receive the parental support I have always desired. Although the pressure to mend things with Sarah is unbearable, I'm beginning to wonder if it's really worth it at this point. If someone doesn't appreciate me, what good is it to try to mend our relationship? Attempting to reconcile with parents who don't see reason is pointless. Even in Sarah's shadow, I've devoted a significant portion of my life to trying to be the good daughter and meet my parents' expectations. However, I'm now coming to the realization that perhaps it's time to let it go. Even though the thought of losing my parents is painful, I can't continue to put the peace at the expense of my own pleasure. I'm attempting to take things day by day for the time being. To work through everything, I'm still going to my therapist. Although I continue to hope that my parents will change their minds, I'm also getting ready for the likelihood that they won't. And I'll have to accept it and go on, if that's the case. I deserve to be happy in the end, even if it means letting go of certain individuals. Update 3. After several more days, I've decided on a course of action. After several talks with James and a lot of introspection, I've come to the conclusion that I can't apologize to Sarah. I've given the repercussions a lot of thought, but ultimately, I would have to contradict all of my beliefs in order to apologize. That would be endorsing her actions, and I am no longer able to do that. It's time for me to leave this dysfunctional cycle. I've been a part of it for too long. My parents have stated unequivocally that they will not go to the wedding until I provide a public apology to Sarah. A part of me was still holding out hope that they would change their mind. that they would see the sense in their demands, and that they would see how cruel and unfair they are. Even though it pains me, I've made the decision to go on without them. I can't continue to put my happiness and health at risk in order to preserve a shaky peace that never existed in the first place. In order to accommodate this new reality, James and I have reorganized our wedding arrangements. At first, I had imagined a big, conventional wedding where my entire family would come together to celebrate our love in style. However, in light of all that has transpired, we have made the decision to reduce, rather than a major event. We've decided to have a more private, smaller ceremony. Only James's family and close friends, who have been nothing but encouraging over this whole process, will be present. I'm not going to lie. It's not what I had in mind. I grew up picturing my wedding day, with loved ones from both sides of the family cheering me on as my parents escorted me down the aisle. It's been hard to let go of that dream. But now that they've made their objectives so brutally obvious, I've come to the conclusion that it's pointless to keep trying to win their favor. They have decided to support Sarah in order to shield and condone her actions at my cost, and I've given up attempting to win their approval. Regarding Sarah, I've given up on attempting to mend our relationship. I now have a different perspective on her as a result of this entire circumstance, and I've finally come to terms with her true self. I let her machinations to pull me down for years. Since everyone in the family acted in such way, I forgave her actions. Sarah was always simply herself. However, I can't continue to live that way. I'm not worthy of being enmeshed in her never-ending drama. And I've come to the conclusion that letting go of her entirely is the only way to genuinely move on. It hasn't been simple to decide to break up contact with Sarah and my parents, and that loss still hurts like hell. However, an unforeseen event brought me some measure of tranquility. My dad's mother, my grandma, contacted me a few days ago. We had a lengthy and meaningful talk when she asked me over for tea. In the family, my grandma has always been a quiet figure, observing things from a distance. This time, she chose to intervene in the family turmoil, even though she's never been one to do so. She expressed her support for me during our talk. In the midst of all this upheaval, hearing those words seemed like a lifeline. She acknowledged that she couldn't alter my parents' opinions or their choice to support Sarah, but she wanted me to know that she could relate to my perspective. She expressed her pride in me for defending my rights and for not apologizing when I had done nothing wrong. My sentiments are validated by a member of my family. It was overwhelming in the greatest way after weeks, a feeling like I was shouting into nothing. My grandmother's visit helped me make sense of things. It served as a reminder that not every member of my family is insensitive to Sarah's actions or contemptuous of my emotions. It means more to me than I can express to know that at least one member of my family supports and understands me. Although it doesn't solve every problem, it makes me feel less isolated in my struggle. I've had some of the most difficult weeks of my life, but I'm beginning to realize that sometimes letting go is the only way to genuinely go on. Letting go of the notion that my parents will ever improve, that Sarah will ever own up to her mistakes, and above all, letting go of the necessity of my family's acceptance in order to feel whole. This new phase of our life excites James and me. The wedding will still be a celebration of our love and dedication to one another, despite being smaller and not exactly as I had envisioned it. In many ways, it seems like the start of something much more powerful, even though it's not the fairy tale conclusion I had hoped for. Additionally, I've decided to keep going to therapy. I've come to the realization that I need professional assistance because I have certain personal problems. There is yet more to come, and I am aware that I will have to confront Sarah and my parents once more, but I feel like I'm headed in the right direction for the first time in a long time. I appreciate all of your help and guidance during this process. For me, it has meant the world. I'm prepared to proceed, concentrating on my contentment, my bond with James, and the future we are creating together.